Okay. Hello and good afternoon. My name is Shea Lineberger, and I will be presenting my Applied Leadership Project today. I would like to introduce my stakeholder, Mrs. Jeannie Smith. She is Assistant Principal at El Dorado High School.
Hi.
Let's see. Hang on, my computer's not wanting to do what I want it to. Okay. For the project, we had to identify a need within an organization. The organization I chose was the El Dorado School District, specifically the high school. The problem I am addressing is that the discipline method used at the high school, like many schools, it follows a more traditional approach to discipline. By modernizing discipline methods, you can move away from those traditional methods, specifically punitive discipline, being a discipline method that relies on punishment to obtain results. This form of discipline, it addresses the problem immediately. However, it doesn't always get to the underlying issue at hand causing the problem behavior. The statement of the purpose. The purpose of this research was to build a way to transition from punitive discipline towards a discipline method of restorative justice. What is restorative justice? Restorative justice is a discipline method that builds an educational community within the school and builds a network of support for students and provides consistency and togetherness. It aims to create accountability and repair harm by showing students how their actions impact the people around them and the environment around them. Instead of students being held just accountable to the school through a consequence such as going to AC or being suspended, it holds them also accountable to those who their actions have actually impacted the most. Restorative justice seeks to build relationships and restore respect for the fellow classmate, along with respect for teachers and those who are in authority. This is just a little picture I found while doing some research on restorative justice that I thought was really representative of the kinds of conversations you can have with students. It says, is everything okay? What happened? How did it happen? How do you feel about it now? And who did your actions hurt? Restorative justice in the classroom, there are many methods you can use. I'm just going to talk about a few things you can do in the classroom and in the school. Restorative circles are a big part of restorative justice. These are just a tool used to develop relationships in schools, in the class, and address conflict between peers. There's many different kinds. There are the types you can use in classrooms just to facilitate conversation. There are types of circles that you can use to talk about the conflict that has happened between a classmate and their peers, the person who did wrong and those they impacted. Another way of using restorative justice in the classroom is by setting classroom rules together. By setting rules together at the beginning of the year between the teacher and the students, by giving them that kind of power to an extent, you can't, it has to be reasonable, gives them more accountability towards how they behave in their classroom. Another way is an intentional conversation. The way we form our words and talk with students has a big impact, and it can really shape the way students react to their negative choices and how we respond. These are just a few examples of restorative practices in the classroom and in the school. The key findings from the research I collected from past research is that often I found that traditional and punitive discipline methods can do more harm than good. That's not saying in every example and in every environment they are doing harm. They can do good, but having students out of the classroom has shown that students can be at more disadvantage than students who are still in the educational environment. In comparison, restorative justice holds students accountable and shows them how their actions affect others, while punitive discipline serves the purpose of stabilizing the immediate environment, but does little to nothing to fix underlying issues beyond that. The research questions I used to formulate my survey were what is the negative effect of punitive discipline in high school setting, and how can El Dorado High School alter their discipline methods to move away from punitive discipline? This is just the questions I used in my survey. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I did want to highlight a few. The questions I asked questions like, as a teacher, do you see repeat offenders in AC and suspension? Do you see change in behavior when students return from AC and suspension? Do you believe punishment alone is enough to change negative behaviors? And I asked a few questions on the interest in restorative justice, along with some questions about history of within the school of the teachers teaching in the school district and their history as teachers. There was altogether 10 closed-ended questions, 5 open-ended, and 2 demographic. In the study, the target population was high school teachers in El Dorado, Arkansas. Survey was sent to 100 teachers. Only 17 surveys were completed in return. However, that was to be expected because of the lack of time I had to gather research. I used non-probability sampling for my research, mainly because I knew that the size of the population in the sample size would be very small, mainly because the limit of time that I had to gather the research. I collected the data through a survey using Google Forms, mainly because it was convenient in its delivery and was paperless, so I didn't have to. There could be no error of lost papers, and it was easier to keep up with everything. The survey was sent out the week of February 1st and had to be completed by February 5th. These graphs are the findings of the 10 close-ended questions. I'm not going to go through them all, but here are a few. As a teacher, do you see repeat offenders in AC and suspension? 94.1% said yes. Do you see a change in behavior with students who return from AC and suspension? For this question, 70.6% said no, whereas 29.4% said yes. Do you believe punishment alone is enough to change negative behavior? 100% of responses said no. When it came to my findings from both the past research and the research I conducted in this study, in the survey, I found that in general, punitive discipline does do more harm than it can do good, just because by removing students from the classroom, it takes takes those students away from the academic atmosphere and puts them at a higher risk of academic failure. Traditional approaches to discipline are becoming more and more obsolete as students who frequent AC and suspension are at a higher rate of academic failure than those who remain in the classroom. And this poses the issue of whether disciplinary actions need to be rerouted in El Dorado High School. Out of the survey participants, 82.4% agreed that disciplinary methods at the high school needed to be improved upon. The survey I conducted showed that teachers are interested in implementing restorative justice practices. However, a large amount did not know enough about the restorative justice to make a decision. Therefore, in order to make a full transition to restorative justice, more information would be needed, would need to be given to teachers. My plan of action is in 5 steps. However, it can be adapted to a longer amount of time. The first step is to present the teachers and faculty with information in regards to restorative justice practices. And I would implement that now and give teachers and faculty time to learn more about it and become more interested. After it is a known fact that a large portion of the school is interested in restorative practices, because I would only then move on to sending 6 to 8 teachers to training. I say this because if there's no interest, it's not going to nothing is going to be successful. You have to have the support of teachers and faculty in order to implement a drastic change like this. After you have that support, I would send them to a training. It's called High Fidelity Implementation. It is a training for trainers. By sending these 6 lead teachers to this 5-day training, you can bring back that training and have teachers within the school that know how to teach these practices to others, therefore cutting down costs when it comes to all school training. After this training, I would use those lead teachers to teach restorative justice methods to other teachers over the course of a year or longer during the 2021-2022 school year, in order to give enough time to to really learn these methods for successful transition. After this, around the start of the 2022-2023 school year, I would make sure that the disciplinary policy is changed in the student handbook and notify parents and students of the change. Just like the teachers, they will need preparation to know this change and to successfully be prepared for such a big transition. And while I have on here to start implementation of restorative justice methods at the start of the 2022-2023 year, it all depends on where the school is in preparation. You could take longer, or you could implement it in one grade level at a time, or do it all at once. Regardless, until all of these things are changed, I would only then would I implement restorative justice in the school. As far as budget goes for the training, the total budget for the initial training is $11,300. This is a rough amount. It could be less, it could be more. And it covers only the high fidelity training, airfare, hotels, and meals for 6 teachers. I would like to thank you for your time and your attention. If you have any questions, please ask. Okay.
Good job, Ms. Shea. One thing in your research with restorative justice, was there anything that struck you that would be different than, say, what you're thinking in terms of a punitive or more traditional? What would be something that stuck out at you that might be different in how we handle situations with student related to discipline?
I would say being more hesitant before, not that with punitive discipline, teachers just jump into sending kids to AC and into suspension, but having more steps before that happens, a more extensive amount of procedure before just sending kids out of the classroom, because like, for example, with the restorative circles, those are a great way of planning out and following through with communication with students. And there's layers to it. There is how the teacher talks with the student, and then there is restorative circles for students and their peers, and for students with the principal and the peers. And I just think having more steps really to mediate and keep kids in the classroom is what's most important.
And that starts with relationships
Yes.
that teachers have with students, whatever method, whether it's restorative justice, love and logic, responsibility,
Yes.
centered discipline. The relationship building that a teacher does with their class is always going to be key. I know at the high school, teachers aren't the ones who assign consequences as far as AC and suspension. The assistant principals do that. But there's usually a conversation that's had about what we want them to be doing, and then an acknowledgement of what's wrong, and then how can we help. And there's even days when I'll start off my conversation with, are you sick? Is there something wrong? Because sometimes that's an issue. And there may still have to be a consequence. They may still have to be out of class for maybe a day. But the intent is to try to get to the heart of the matter. And so the training would help teachers know whether or not they had time to do that, or if they had to send them to the office because they couldn't stop class in the moment, to know that we were going to have that conversation with them in the office would help. So,
yes, I agree.
Yeah. So, got some good ideas.
Well, do you have any other questions?
No, I think that's it.
All right.
I like your plan of action, and if you get the right 6 lead teachers, they'll come back and be so fired up. They'll start implementing in their neighborhood.
Be a ripple effect.